When I arrived at this restaurant, the hostess looked at my old shoes and said, "The party is full, sir. You are not on the list." I stared at her and replied, "I paid $5,000 just to reserve this room." She laughed and called security. So I made a phone call, and by the end of the night, I owned the building. My name is Lawrence Pellington. I am 68 years old, and I have spent my entire life building things. Warehouses, logistics, networks, and apparently a family of vipers. But before I tell you how I dismantled my son's life in 3 hours, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever been underestimated by the very people you supported. The Gilded Rose was glowing under the twilight sky. It was the kind of restaurant that charged $50 for an appetizer and treated oxygen like a premium service. I stood on the sidewalk smoothing the lapels of my charcoal gray suit. It was 10 years old. I had bought it for my wife's funeral. It was the only suit I owned that still felt like it had a soul. Tonight was my granddaughter Lily's 16th birthday. A sweet 16. That is what they called it. To me, it was just a chance to see the one person in my family who did not look at me as if I were a walking ATM. I walked toward the entrance. The valet parking attendant looked at my 10-year-old Ford Taurus with a sneer, but I ignored him. I had parked it myself around the corner. I did not like strangers touching my steering wheel. I stepped into the foyer. The air smelled of expensive perfume and lilies. The noise of the party drifted from the main ballroom. Laughter, clinking glasses, the heavy thud of bass from a DJ booth. I felt a small smile touch my lips. I had wired $50,000 to my son Bradley 2 weeks ago to cover this. I wanted Lily to have the best. A young woman stood behind the hostess podium. She could not have been older than 25. She wore a black dress that cost more than my car, and she held a tablet like it was the codes to a nuclear arsenal. She looked up. Her eyes scanned me from my gray hair down to my scuffed leather shoes. Her lip curled just a fraction of an inch. "Can I help you, sir?" she asked. Her tone suggested that the best way I could help was by leaving. "I am here for the Pellington party," I said. She tapped on her tablet without looking at me. "Name?" "Lawrence Pellington. I am the grandfather." She stopped tapping. She looked at the screen, then back at me. Her expression went from bored to icy. "I am sorry, sir. The Pellington party is a private event. The guest list is strictly enforced." "I know it is private," I said, keeping my voice calm. "I paid for the deposit." "Check again." "I do not need to check again," she said. "The list was finalized and approved by Mrs. Vanessa Pellington this morning. There is no Lawrence on it." The name Vanessa hit me like a physical blow. My daughter-in-law, the woman who had spent the last 15 years trying to scrub the smell of the logistics industry off the Pellington name. "There must be a mistake," I said, stepping closer. "I am Bradley's father." "Go get him." "I cannot disturb the hosts," she said. "They are in the middle of a toast. Please leave or I will have to call security. You are making the other guests uncomfortable." I looked around. A couple in evening wear was staring at me, whispering. I felt the heat rise in my neck. It was not shame. It was anger. I had built the supply chain that likely delivered the food they were eating tonight. I had signed checks that kept this restaurant from bankruptcy 5 years ago, though nobody knew that but the owner, Giovanni. And now I was being kicked out of a party I funded. "Call Bradley," I said. My voice dropped an octave. It was the voice I used when a union negotiation went south. "Call him now or I walk in there myself." She hesitated. She saw something in my eyes that made her nervous. She picked up a radio and whispered into it. 2 minutes later, the double doors opened. It was not security. It was Bradley. My son looked impeccable. He wore a tuxedo that fit him perfectly, a glass of champagne in one hand and a look of absolute panic on his face. He did not wave. He did not smile. He rushed toward me and grabbed my elbow, pulling me into a dark alcove near the coat check. "Dad." "What are you doing here?" he hissed. I pulled my arm away. "I am here for Lily's birthday. I drove 40 minutes. I have a gift in my pocket. And your gatekeeper tells me I am not on the list." Bradley looked over his shoulder, terrified that one of his friends might see us. "You should not have come, Dad. Vanessa said she made it clear to you on the phone last week. She said it was a formal event," I said. "She did not say I was banned." "Look at you," Bradley said, gesturing at my suit. "That suit is ancient. It smells like mothballs. This is a high society event, Dad. Lily's classmates are here. Their parents are here. Important people. Investors. I am an investor," I said, my voice trembling with suppressed rage. "I invested $50,000 in this party, Bradley. I invested my entire life in you." "Lower your voice," Bradley whispered frantically. "Look, Dad, we appreciate the money. We really do. But you do not fit the aesthetic. Vanessa hired a photographer from Vogue. We are trying to build a network here. We are trying to launch Vanessa's lifestyle brand. Having you here wandering around looking like a retired janitor, it sends the wrong message." I stared at him. This was the boy I had taught to ride a bike. The boy I had bailed out of credit card debt 3 times before he turned 30. The boy whose failed startup I had quietly absorbed into my company so he would not have to declare bankruptcy. "So my money is welcome?" I asked slowly. "But I am not." "It is complicated," Dad Bradley said, wiping sweat from his forehead. "It is about image. You know how the world works." "I know exactly how the world works," I said. "You take the check and you hide the checkbook." Bradley reached into his tuxedo pocket. He pulled out a money clip and peeled off a $50 bill. He tried to press it into my hand. "Here," he said. "Take a taxi home. Do not drive that old Ford at night, your eyes are getting bad. Go home, watch some TV. We will stop by tomorrow with some cake. I promise. Tell Lily happy birthday for me." I looked at the $50 bill. Then I looked at my son. He was 40 years old, but in that moment he looked like a child playing dress-up in his father's clothes. He had no idea what he had just done. He thought he was solving a small embarrassment. He did not realize he was severing the only lifeline he had left. I did not take the money. I stepped back. "Enjoy the party, Bradley," I said. "Make sure you get good photos." I turned around and walked out. I heard Bradley let out a sigh of relief behind me. He thought he had won. He thought the problem was gone. I walked out into the cool night air. The valet looked at me again, expecting a ticket. I walked past him around the corner to where my Ford Taurus was parked under a flickering street lamp. I got in and sat in the driver's seat. The leather was cracked, and the engine made a wheezing sound when I turned the key, but it was mine. It was paid for. It was real. I sat there for a moment, watching the glow of the restaurant. I could see the silhouettes of people dancing in the ballroom windows. They were drinking my champagne. They were eating food paid for with the dividends of my 40 years of labor. I reached into my inner pocket and pulled out my phone. It was an old model, but it made calls just fine. I did not call Bradley. I did not call Vanessa. I dialed a number I had saved for emergencies. It was the direct line to the private wealth division of my bank. It was 8:30 on a Saturday night, but when you have the kind of liquidity I have, someone always answers. "Mr. Pellington," the voice on the other end said. "This is a surprise. Is everything all right?" "No, David," I said. "Everything is not all right. I need to make some security changes to my accounts." "Of course, sir. What do you need?" I took a deep breath. The image of Bradley trying to hand me $50 burned in my mind. The shame in his eyes. The absolute lack of respect. I want you to freeze all supplementary cards issued on my primary account, I said. Specifically, the cards issued to Bradley Pellington and Vanessa Pellington. There was a brief pause. David was a professional, but even he was surprised. All of them, sir. The black card. The platinum travel card. All of them, I said. Mark them as compromised. Immediate suspension. No authorizations. No exceptions. Done, David said. The keystrokes clicked in the background. Anything else? Yes, I said. I want you to flag the transfer I made 2 weeks ago. The $50,000 to Bradley's checking account. That transaction has already cleared, sir. I know, I said. But I want to know where it went. I want a forensic breakdown of every cent spent from that account in the last 14 days. Send it to my secure email. Now. Consider it done, Mr. Pellington. I hung up the phone. My hands were steady. My heart was beating a slow, heavy rhythm. I was not sad. Sadness is a luxury for people who have options. I had no options left. They had made their choice. They chose the image over the man. Now they would have to live with the reality. I opened my laptop, which I always kept in the passenger seat. I connected to the car's hotspot. The email from the bank arrived within 3 minutes. I opened the spreadsheet. The numbers danced across the screen, glowing in the dark car. I scrolled down looking for the payments to the catering company, the DJ, the florist. I saw them. But then I saw other things. Things that made my blood turn cold. The $50,000 I had sent was gone. But only $20,000 had gone to the Gilded Rose. Where was the rest? I scrolled down. $5,000 to a luxury leasing agency for a Porsche Cayenne. $8,000 to Van Cleef Arpels. $12,000 to a shell company called VP Image Consulting. Vanessa. She was siphoning the money. She was using my granddaughter's birthday budget to fund her own vanity projects and pay off her personal debts. VP Image Consulting was her business. She was paying herself with my money to plan her own daughter's party. I sat back in the seat. The betrayal was deeper than I thought. It was not just snobbery. It was theft. I remembered 6 months ago when Bradley had come to my house. He had sat at my kitchen table crying. He told me his business was struggling. He told me he needed help with Lily's tuition. I had agreed to cover their basic living expenses while he got back on his feet. I gave him access to a supplementary credit card for emergencies. I checked the credit card statement for that card next. Emergency dinners at Nobu. Emergency weekends in the Hamptons. Emergency Gucci loafers. They were bleeding me dry, and they were laughing while they did it. They thought I was a senile old man sitting in a paid-off house too out of touch to check the digital statements. They thought because I drove a Ford and wore old suits that I did not know how to count. I had built a logistics empire by counting every fraction of a cent per mile. I knew exactly how to count. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rick Belmont, my lawyer. Rick was a shark who slept in a suit. Lawrence, urgent. Just got a notification from the court filing system. Bradley filed a petition this morning. Emergency guardianship. He claims you are suffering from rapid onset dementia. He wants control of the Pellington Trust by Monday. I stared at the screen. The pieces clicked together like the tumblers of a safe. The rejection at the door. It was not just about embarrassment. It was strategic. They needed me absent. If I showed up lucid and sharp, it would ruin their narrative. They needed to tell their guests, their potential investors and witnesses that poor Lawrence was unwell, that he was in a facility, that he was losing his mind. They were not just stealing my money, they were stealing my life. I looked up at the restaurant. The music seemed louder now, a mockery. They were in there celebrating their victory. Bradley was probably on stage right now giving a tearful speech about his father's declining health, while Vanessa modeled the jewelry she bought with my money. I felt a cold calm settle over me. It was the same calm I felt before a hostile takeover. I started the engine of the Ford Taurus. I did not put it in gear. I sat there and watched the valet run to open the door of a Bentley. I had two choices. I could go home. I could fight this in court on Monday. I could let Rick file motions and counter motions while my son dragged my name through the mud and claimed I was insane. It would take months. It would be quiet. It would be dignified. Or I could go back inside. I looked at the passenger seat. There was a folder of documents I had brought to give to Bradley property deeds for a cabin I was going to gift him. I wouldn't be needing those. But underneath them was my iPad connected to my bank and my legal portal. I picked up my phone again. I dialed a number I had not called in 5 years. Giovanni. He answered on the second ring. The background noise was loud. Lawrence, is that you? It has been too long, my friend. Giovanni, I said. I am in your parking lot. You are... Why did you not come in? I would have prepared the chef's table. I tried, Giovanni. Your staff wouldn't let me in. They said I wasn't on the list. There was silence on the line. Then a string of Italian curses. I am coming out there right now, Lawrence. I will fire her myself. No, Giovanni. Do not fire her. She is just doing what she was told. Stay inside. Then come in, my friend. Please. I will, Giovanni, but I need you to do something for me first. Do you remember the agreement we signed in 2018? The one where I hold 40% of the equity in the Gilded Rose as a silent partner. Of course, Lawrence. You saved my life. I never forget. Good. I need you to pull the guest list for tonight. And I need you to bring me the itemized invoice for the party. The final bill. The one they have to sign at the end of the night. The invoice, Lawrence, that is highly irregular. Bring it to the back door, Giovanni. And bring a microphone. A microphone? Yes. I am coming to the party, and I am going to make a toast. I hung up the phone. I looked at myself in the rearview mirror. The gray hair, the wrinkles, the old suit. They wanted a ghost. They were about to get one. I opened the car door and stepped out. This time I did not walk toward the main entrance. I walked toward the service alley. The air was colder now. The wind bit through my thin jacket. I was not just a father anymore. I was not just a grandfather. I was a liability they had tried to liquidate. And liabilities have a nasty habit of showing up on the balance sheet when you least expect them. I reached the back door. It opened. Giovanni stood there looking anxious, holding a clipboard and a wireless microphone. Lawrence, he said, looking at my suit. You look... I look like I am ready to do business, I said, taking the clipboard. I scanned the invoice. $53,000 total. Paid so far. $5,000 deposit mine. $20,000 transfer mine. Balance due tonight. $28,000. The payment method on file was the American Express Platinum card ending in 4099. My card. The one I had just frozen. Perfect. Giovanni, I said, I want you to do exactly as I say. Let the party continue. Let them cut the cake. Let Bradley make his speech. When the bill comes due, run the card. It will decline, Lawrence. You said you froze it. Exactly, I said. When it declines, come find me. I will be on the stage. Giovanni looked pale. Lawrence, what are you going to do? I am going to teach my son a lesson about economics, I said. I adjusted my tie. I checked my pocket to make sure I had my phone, my iPad, and the printed email from the bank. I pushed past Giovanni into the kitchen. The heat hits me first. The smell of searing steak and truffle oil. Cooks were shouting orders. Waiters were rushing out with trays of champagne. None of them noticed the old man in the gray suit walking through their lines. I reached the swinging doors that led to the ballroom. I could hear Bradley's voice on the speakers. He sounded confident. He sounded rich. And though my father could not be here tonight due to his condition, I know he would be so proud of the empire Vanessa and I are building for Lily. Applause. Polite ripple of applause. I pushed the doors open. The lights were dim. The room was bathed in gold and purple. There were crystal chandeliers and silk tablecloths. It was beautiful. It was expensive. It was a fraud. I walked through the shadows along the wall. I saw faces I recognized. Bankers, real estate developers, people I had done business with 20 years ago. They were looking at Bradley with polite interest, sipping the wine I had paid for. I saw Lily, my granddaughter. She was sitting at the head table looking beautiful in a blue dress, but she looked sad. She was staring at her phone, ignoring the speech. She missed her grandfather. I saw Vanessa. She was standing next to Bradley, glowing with triumph. She had her hand on his shoulder, playing the supportive wife. Bradley raised his glass. So let us raise a glass to family, to legacy, and to the future. To the future, the crowd echoed. I stepped out of the shadows. I walked up the stairs to the stage. I moved slowly, deliberately. The room went quiet. It started as a ripple near the front and spread back like a wave. The applause died. The music faded as the DJ noticed the tension. Bradley saw me first. His glass froze halfway to his lips. His face drained of color, turning a sickly shade of gray. Vanessa gasped. Her hand flew to her mouth. She looked at security, but it was too late. I was already at the podium. I reached out and took the microphone from Bradley's limp hand. He did not resist. He was paralyzed. "Thank you, son," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, clear and steady. That was a touching speech, especially the part about my condition. I turned to the crowd. 300 faces stared back at me. Confusion. Curiosity. "Good evening, everyone. I apologize for my attire. I was told this was a costume party. I came dressed as a man who pays his debts." Vanessa lunged forward. She grabbed my arm. Her nails dug into my suit jacket. "Dad, what are you doing?" she hissed. "You are sick. You need to leave. Security." I pulled my arm away. "Do not touch me, Vanessa." I looked at the crowd again. "My son tells you I am sick. He has filed papers with the court saying I have dementia, that I am a danger to myself and my finances." Murmurs broke out in the room. "But I seem to remember things quite clearly," I continued. "I remember writing a check for $50,000 2 weeks ago for this party. I remember getting my son a credit card for emergencies." I pulled the bank statement from my pocket. I unfolded it on the podium. "I also remember that a Sweet 16 party does not usually include a $15,000 payment to VP Image Consulting or an $8,000 charge at a jewelry store." Vanessa went white. She stepped back, shaking her head. "He is lying. He is confused." "Am I?" I asked. "Giovanni." Giovanni stepped out from the wings. He looked terrified, but he nodded. "Giovanni," I said into the mic, "who paid the deposit for this room?" "You did, Mr. Pellington," Giovanni said. "Personal check." "And who is the silent owner of 40% of this establishment?" "You are Mr. Pellington." The room gasped, a collective intake of breath that sucked the oxygen out of the space. Bradley dropped his glass. It shattered on the stage. The sound was like a gunshot. "Now," I said, turning to my son, "about that future you toasted to." I pulled out my phone. I held it up. "I just got off the phone with the bank, Bradley. The cards are dead. The credit line is closed. The monthly allowance for living expenses has been terminated." Bradley was shaking. "Dad, please, not here, not in front of them." You wanted them here, Bradley, I roared. My voice cracked with the pain of it. You wanted the audience. You wanted the witnesses to your success. Well, here they are. Let them witness this. I pointed to the big screen behind the stage where a slideshow of Lily was playing. Giovanni cut the feed. Connect my iPad. Giovanni scrambled to the AV booth. The screen flickered. Lily's face disappeared. In its place appeared the court document Bradley had filed that morning. The petition for emergency guardianship. This, I said, pointing to the screen, is what my son gave me for my granddaughter's birthday. A legal attempt to lock me away and seize my assets. He says I am incompetent. He says I squander money. I swiped the screen. The bank statement appeared. The highlighted rows of theft. The luxury car lease. The jewelry. The consulting fees. Who is squandering money, Bradley? Who is the thief? Stop it! Vanessa screamed. She ran toward the AV booth trying to pull the cords. It is over, Vanessa, I shouted. The money is gone. The well is dry. I looked at Lily. She was standing up now, tears streaming down her face. She looked from me to her parents. She saw the truth. Grandpa, she whispered. I softened. I am sorry, Lily. I am so sorry you have to see this, but I will not let them sell your future to pay for their mistakes. I turned back to Bradley. You have 24 hours to vacate the house. It is owned by the Pellington Trust, and since I am the only competent trustee left, I am evicting you. Dad, you can't. Bradley fell to his knees. He was crying now, real ugly tears. We have nowhere to go. We have no money. You have $50, I said. You tried to give it to me in the lobby. Use it for a taxi. I placed the microphone on the podium. The silence was absolute. I walked down the stairs. The crowd parted for me like the Red Sea. They looked at me with fear and respect. They looked at Bradley and Vanessa with disgust. I walked over to Lily. Happy birthday, sweetheart, I said. I put your gift in a trust fund. Your parents cannot touch it. Only you, when you are 25. She hugged me. She buried her face in my old suit and sobbed. Come on, I said. Let's get some ice cream. This party is over. As we walked out the double doors, I heard Giovanni's voice behind me. Mr. Bradley, Mrs. Vanessa, the final bill is $28,000. Your card has been declined. If you cannot pay, I will have to call the police. I did not look back. I walked out into the night holding my granddaughter's hand. The air was cold, but for the first time in a long time, I felt warm. I drove Lily to a diner 3 blocks away. We ate sundaes in silence for a while. Are they going to jail? She asked quietly. Maybe, I said. Fraud is a serious crime, but that is up to them and their lawyers. Why did they do it, Grandpa? Because they forgot the most important rule of business, Lily, I said, and the most important rule of family. What is that? Never bite the hand that feeds you unless you are sure you can survive the starvation. I looked at her. She was young. She was hurt. But she was free of them now. I would raise her. I would teach her. I would make sure she knew the value of $1 and the value of a name. My phone buzzed. It was a text from Rick. Bradley is calling me. He wants to negotiate. I typed a reply. Tell him he is not on the list. I put the phone away. I took a bite of my ice cream. It tasted like victory. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the suffocating darkness of my car. I adjusted my glasses and cracked my knuckles. To most people, a spreadsheet is just a wall of numbers, a boring grid of static data that makes their eyes glaze over. But to me, it is a map. It is a crime scene. It is a confession tape. For 40 years, I ran logistics for the largest industrial shipping network on the eastern seaboard. I did not move boxes, I moved information. I tracked assets across oceans and borders. I knew how to spot a phantom shipment in a manifest of 10,000 containers. I knew that when a number does not add up, it is never an accident. It is always a story someone is trying to hide. I logged into the secure portal of my private banking interface. The interface was stark and minimalist, designed for clients who did not need colorful graphs to understand their net worth. I navigated to the transfer history. There it was. Transaction ID 4992, $50,000, sent 14 days ago. The memo line read, Lily Suite 16. It had landed in Bradley's primary checking account on a Tuesday morning at 9 a.m. By noon that same day, the balance in his account had dropped back to $300. Money moves like water. It flows downhill. It seeks the path of least resistance. And if you know how to watch the current, you can see exactly where the leaks are. I pulled up the mirrored view of Bradley's account. I had set this up years ago when I first bailed him out of a failed investment scheme. He had signed the authorization forms without reading them, just happy to have the cash. He probably forgot I even had this access. That is the thing about unearned money. You do not respect the source, so you forget the strings attached to it. I started dissecting the outflows. I expected to see payments to the Gilded Rose. I expected to see deposits for florists, photographers, maybe a high-end dress shop for Lily. What I found was an autopsy of my son's integrity. The first chunk was the largest, $15,400. It was wired out 40 minutes after my deposit hit. The recipient was Sovereign Credit Services. I frowned and opened a second tab to cross-reference the merchant ID. It was a debt consolidation firm. Specifically, it was the firm handling the collections for a Neiman Marcus credit card. I knew that card. I had warned Vanessa about it 3 years ago when she maxed it out buying designer handbags she could not afford. I felt a cold tightness in my chest. They had taken the money meant for my granddaughter's milestone celebration and used it to plug the hole in Vanessa's vanity. $15,000. That could have been a college fund. That could have been a car for Lily. Instead, it was a retroactive payment for purses and shoes that were probably already out of fashion. I kept scrolling. The lines on the screen were sharp and accusing. There were small, legitimate charges. $5,000 to the restaurant for the deposit. $2,000 to a DJ. A few hundred for invitations. Crumbs. They had spent just enough to make the party happen, just enough to keep up the appearance of a celebration. But the substance was gone. Then I saw it. The transaction that made my blood run cold. $10,000. It was a wire transfer sent to an entity listed as Mindset Horizons LLC. I paused. The name sounded vague. Corporate. It could have been anything. A consulting firm. A life coach. But the amount was specific. $10,000 flat. No cents. That is a retainer. That is a fee for services rendered or services anticipated. I copied the tax ID number of the recipient and ran it through a business registry database I still subscribed to. It was an old habit from my days of vetting contractors. You never pay a vendor until you know who owns the company. The search results loaded. Mindset Horizons. LLC. Registered Agent Dr. Aris Thorne. Principal place of business, a medical suite in the financial district. I opened a new tab and searched for Dr. Aris Thorne. His website was sleek and dark. His photo showed a man with a perfectly trimmed beard and eyes that looked like they were evaluating your net worth rather than your mental health. Dr. Aris Thorne. Geriatric Psychiatry and Competency Evaluations. Expert Witness Services. I sat back in my seat. The leather creaked. The air in the car suddenly felt thin. $10,000. They had not just stolen from me. That would have been simple greed. This was an investment. They were using my own money, the money I gave them out of love for my granddaughter, to pay a hitman. Not a hitman with a gun, but one with a notepad and a prescription pad. Dr. Thorne was the man who had signed the affidavit Bradley filed with the court this morning. I did not need to see the document to know it. The timeline matched perfectly. The money went out. The diagnosis came in. I looked at the timestamp on the transfer. It was sent 5 days ago. That was the consultation fee. They had prepaid for a diagnosis of dementia. They had bought my insanity. I closed my eyes for a second, envisioning the transaction. Bradley sitting at his computer, sweating, perhaps hesitating for a moment, before clicking send. Vanessa standing over his shoulder, telling him it was necessary, telling him it was for the best, telling him that I was too old to manage that much wealth anyway. They used my money to buy the shovel they intended to bury me with. I looked back at the screen. There was one more significant charge. $4,000 to a travel agency specializing in luxury rentals. The dates corresponded to a week last month. I remembered that week. Bradley had called me crying, saying he was overwhelmed with work and depression. I had offered to come over to help with the house. He had told me no. He said they were just going to stay home and unplug. They had gone to Cabo. I could see the flight manifest attached to the travel agency invoice. First class. $4,000 of my money spent on margaritas and ocean views, while I sat in my empty house worrying about my son's mental health. I felt a strange sensation in my hands. They were steady, rock steady. I was not shaking. I was not crying. The part of me that was a father was grieving, yes. Somewhere deep down there was a small voice screaming in pain. But the part of me that was Lawrence Pellington, the man who built an empire from a single truck, that part was waking up. That part was taking over. I had spent the last 10 years trying to be soft, trying to be the gentle grandfather, trying to make up for the long hours I worked when Bradley was a boy. I thought that if I just gave enough, if I just supported them enough, they would feel loved. I realized now that I had been feeding sharks, and sharks do not feel gratitude. They only feel hunger. I downloaded the entire transaction history. I saved the invoices. I took screenshots of the wire transfers to Dr. Thorne and the debt collectors. I compiled it all into a single PDF file. This was not just data. This was ammunition. I looked out the window at the restaurant. It looked different to me now. Before it had looked like a place of exclusion, a place where I wasn't good enough. Now it looked like a trap. And they were the ones inside it. They were in there right now drinking champagne that I paid for, celebrating a victory that was built on a foundation of fraud. They thought the $10,000 they sent to Dr. Thorne had bought them safety. They thought the paper shield of a guardianship petition would protect them from me. They forgot who I was. They forgot that before I was a retiree in a Ford Taurus, I was the man who negotiated contracts with unions that could shut down the entire eastern seaboard. I was the man who found the inefficiencies in a system and eliminated them without mercy. Bradley was an inefficiency. Vanessa was a liability. I checked the time. It was 8:45. The party was in full swing. The speeches would be starting soon. The moment where they cemented their narrative of the sad, sick grandfather. I closed my laptop. I did not turn it off. I just put it to sleep. I needed it ready. I picked up my phone again. I had the evidence. I knew where the money went. I knew the name of the doctor. I knew the depth of the betrayal. It was time to balance the books. I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The eyes staring back were not the eyes of a victim. They were the eyes of an auditor. And the audit was about to begin. I opened the car door and stepped out into the night. The wind had picked up, but I didn't feel the cold. I felt only the heat of the fire that was about to burn their house of cards to the ground. I started walking back toward the restaurant, not to the front door this time, but to the back, to the service entrance, to the place where the real work gets done. I had a receipt to show them, and I was going to make sure everyone saw it. The phone in my hand felt heavy like a stone pulled from a riverbed, cold and slick. I dialed Rick Belmont. Rick was not just a lawyer, he was a weapon in a pinstripe suit. We had met 30 years ago when a corrupt union boss tried to burn down one of my warehouses. Rick had extinguished that fire with a terrifying amount of paperwork and a few quiet conversations that left the other side trembling. He answered on the first ring, which told me he was already looking at a screen with my name on it. "Lawrence," he said. His voice was not the friendly baritone of a Saturday night catch-up. It was the sharp, metallic tone of a man watching a bomb countdown. "I was just about to call you." "Where are you?" "I am in the parking lot of the Gilded Rose," I said. My voice was steady, but my free hand was gripping the steering wheel so hard the leather was groaning. "I just found a $10,000 wire transfer from Bradley's account to a Dr. Aris Thorne." "Tell me you know who that is." There was a pause on the line. I heard the rustle of papers, the click of a mouse. "I know exactly who he is," Lawrence Rick said, "and you need to listen to me very carefully. You are not safe where you are." Why, I asked. Because at 9 o'clock this morning, Bradley Pellington filed an ex parte petition in the probate court. He is seeking emergency temporary guardianship over you and your estate. The words hung in the air of the car, sucking the oxygen out of the small space. Guardianship. It was a legal term I knew well. I had used it once 20 years ago for an aunt who had truly lost her way, who was walking into traffic and forgetting her own name. It was a measure of last resort, a legal cage designed to protect the vulnerable. But when wielded by a son against a father who is perfectly sane, it is not a shield, it is a shiv. "Read it to me," I said. "Lawrence, you do not want to hear this." "Read it, Rick." I heard him take a breath. "The petition alleges that you are suffering from rapid onset dementia characterized by severe paranoia, aggressive outbursts, and fiscal irresponsibility. It claims you are squandering the family estate on irrational purchases and that you have become a danger to yourself. It cites instances of you forgetting where you live, wandering the streets, and becoming violent when confronted." I looked at my reflection in the rearview mirror. The eyes staring back were sharp, clear, and burning with a cold fire. I had never forgotten where I lived. I had never wandered anywhere unless I was inspecting a property line. "And the evidence?" I asked. "A judge does not sign a warrant for a man's freedom based on a son's word alone." Rick sighed. "Exhibit A is a sworn affidavit from Dr. Aris Thorne. It states that he has evaluated you over the course of the last month. He claims your cognitive decline is catastrophic. He recommends immediate placement in a secure memory care facility for your own protection." I laughed. It was a dry, harsh sound that scraped my throat. "Evaluated me. Rick. I have never met this man. I have never stepped foot in his office. I have never shaken his hand. I know that," Lawrence Rick said, "but the judge does not know that. The filing includes telemedicine logs, fake ones. They claim he evaluated you remotely via video calls that Bradley set up. They have created a paper trail of a patient who does not exist. The $10,000, it was a retainer for perjury. They had bought a medical opinion the way you buy a used car." "What is the goal, Rick?" I asked. "Is it just control of the accounts?" "It is worse," Rick said. "The petition requests that Bradley be named your temporary conservator with full power of attorney. It grants him immediate access to the Pellington Trust, your personal banking, and your real estate portfolio. But Lawrence, there is an addendum. They filed a motion for emergency housing placement." English Rick. "They claim your current residence, Pellington Manor, is unsafe for you in your condition. They claim it is too large, too full of hazards. They have already secured a bed for you at Sunrise Hills. It is a nursing home on the other side of the county." Sunrise Hills. I knew the place. It was a warehouse for the forgotten, a place where the air smelled of bleach and despair. They want to lock me up, I said softly. They want to remove the obstacle, Rick corrected. If they get this order signed, and I believe they might have a judge on rotation this weekend who rubber stamps these things, they can have the police pick you up. Tonight. They can take you from that restaurant straight to the facility. By the time we get a hearing on Monday, you will be sedated and locked in a room, and they will have the keys to the manor. Pellington Manor. I closed my eyes and saw my house. It sat on 4 acres of manicured lawn, a brick Georgian colonial that I had built with the profits from my first major merger. It was not just a house. It was a vault. It held my wife's paintings. It held the books I had collected for 50 years. It held the silence I had earned. The manor is valued at $8 million, I said. The trust holds another $12 million in liquid assets. That is 20 million reasons to put you away, Rick said. Lawrence, they aren't just doing this for the money. They are doing this to erase you. If you are in a home declared incompetent, they can move into the manor tomorrow. They can sell off the assets. They can live like kings while you stare at a wall. I thought about the conversation I had overheard 6 months ago. Vanessa complaining about their cramped rental. Bradley promising her that things would change soon. I had thought he meant his business was picking up. I didn't realize he meant he was planning a coup. They were reckless. They were spending money they didn't pump on cars and jewelry, and now that the well was running dry, they decided to butcher the goose. Are they at the house now, Rick? I asked. My investigator drove by an hour ago, Rick said. There is a moving truck parked 2 streets over, unmarked. They are waiting for the signal. They expect you to be taken into custody at the party. Once you are gone, they will move in tonight. They will change the locks before the sun comes up. My hands were shaking now, not from fear, but from a rage so pure it felt like clarity. They were going to evict me from my own life. They were going to throw me into a cell and strip mine my legacy. They made one mistake, I said. What is that? Rick asked. They sent the invitation to the wrong man. They think they are dealing with a confused old grandfather who just wants everyone to get along. They forgot they are dealing with the man who broke the dock workers' strike of '89. Lawrence, do not do anything illegal, Rick warned. If you cause a scene, if you look aggressive, you will play right into their narrative. They want you to look unstable. If you walk in there screaming, they win. The police will see a crazy old man, and Dr. Thorne's affidavit will look like prophecy. I am not going to scream, Rick, I said. I am going to audit. I need you to do something for me. I need you to draft a counter motion. I need you to file a restraining order against Bradley and Vanessa, protecting my assets and my person. And I need you to contact Dr. Thorne. Tell him he has 24 hours to retract his affidavit, or I will sue him for medical malpractice, fraud, and conspiracy. Tell him I have the wire transfer receipt. Tell him I know he took a bribe. I will start drafting now, Rick said. But Lawrence, that won't stop the police if the order is already in the system. You need to be somewhere safe. You need to leave that parking lot. I am not leaving, I said. I am going to the party. Lawrence, they want to say I have dementia, I said, cutting him off. They want to say I am incompetent. Fine. I am going to walk onto that stage, and I am going to give the most lucid, detailed presentation of my life. I am going to show their friends, their investors, and their precious social circle exactly how competent I am. You are going to expose the financials, Rick realized. I am going to burn their reputation to the ground, I said. And Rick, I need you to send a courier to the restaurant. A courier? Yes. I want you to bring the deed to the manor. And I want you to bring the trust documents, the ones with the morality clause, the clause that allows you to disinherit beneficiaries for criminal conduct. That is the one. Bring them. I want them to see what they lost. I hung up the phone. The silence in the car was heavy, but it was no longer suffocating. It was the silence of a war room before the first shot is fired. I looked at the bank statement on my laptop screen again. The $10,000 to Dr. Thorne. The $15,000 to the debt collectors. They had built a trap for me out of paper and lies. They thought that because they used big words like guardianship and dementia, that I would crumble. They thought that the authority of a court filing would make me doubt my own mind. I checked my watch. It was almost 9. The speeches would be starting. Bradley would be up there right now, wiping away a fake tear, telling the room how hard it was to watch his father fade away. He was building the narrative. He was setting the stage for the police to arrive and take the confused old man away quietly. He wanted a tragedy. I was going to give him a thriller. I reached into the glove compartment and pulled out a fresh handkerchief. I wiped my glasses. I looked at my face in the mirror. I did not look confused. I looked like a man who had just discovered a termite infestation in the foundation of his home. You do not negotiate with termites. You exterminate them. I picked up the laptop. I tucked it under my arm. I grabbed the folder of evidence. I was not going to run. I was not going to hide in a hotel room while my lawyer fought my battles. I was going to walk into the lion's den, and I was going to show them that they were not lions at all. They were just scavengers. And the carcass they were trying to feed on was still very much alive and very, very dangerous. I opened the car door. The sound of the night was different now. The wind seemed to carry a warning. Not for me. For them. I walked toward the service entrance of the Gilded Rose. Giovanni was waiting. The stage was set. They wanted to take my home. They wanted to take my mind. They wanted to take my dignity. They were about to find out that the only thing Lawrence Pellington ever gave away was lessons, and tonight class was in session. I stood in the shadows of the service corridor, the heavy steel door propped open just enough to let the bass of the DJ booth vibrate against my chest. Giovanni had gone to prepare the final invoice. I was alone. For a man who had spent 40 years surrounded by the noise of shipping yards and boardroom arguments, I had learned that the most dangerous information is often found in the quietest places. I unlocked my phone again. I did not check my bank account this time. I opened Instagram. I had created an account 3 years ago under a pseudonym. I did not follow celebrities or news outlets. I followed exactly one person. My granddaughter, Lily. It was the only way to see her grow up without filtering through the gatekeeping of her mother. Vanessa curated Lily's life like a museum exhibit, but occasionally in the candid stories or the tagged photos I could see the real girl. The girl who liked sketching in charcoal and listening to old jazz records. The girl who used to sit on my lap and ask me how ships floated. I refreshed the feed. A new photo had been posted 4 minutes ago. It was a high-resolution professional shot, doubtless taken by the Vogue photographer Bradley had bragged about. Lily stood in the center of the ballroom. She was smiling, but her eyes were tight at the corners. It was the smile of a girl who knows she is a prop in someone else's play. She was holding a glass of sparkling cider. Vanessa stood behind. Her hands possessively on Lily's shoulders, beaming with a predatory pride. Bradley was to the side, looking flushed and triumphant. The caption read, "Our baby girl is all grown up. So proud to give her the world tonight." Sweet 16. Pellington Legacy. I zoomed in on the photo. The pixels expanded. I scrolled past Lily's face, past the designer dress that I knew cost $4,000 because I had seen the charge on the statement earlier. My thumb stopped moving. My breath stopped in my throat. Around Lily's neck, resting against her collarbone, was a necklace. It was not just jewelry. It was a platinum chain supporting a 3-carat solitaire diamond, cut in a vintage cushion style surrounded by a halo of sapphires. I knew that diamond. I knew the specific inclusion in the bottom facet that was invisible to the naked eye, but looked like a small feather under a loupe. I knew the weight of the platinum setting. I knew the clasp had a tiny dent from when it was dropped on a bathroom tile in Paris in 1995. It was Sarah's necklace, my late wife. I felt a wave of nausea roll over me so violent I had to lean against the brick wall. The world tilted. The sounds of the kitchen behind me faded into a dull roar. That necklace was not a gift. It was not an heirloom that had been passed down. It was a sacred object. When Sarah died 6 years ago, I had taken that necklace off her dresser. I had held it to my nose, smelling her perfume on the metal, and then I had placed it in a velvet box. I did not put it in a drawer. I put it in the floor safe in the master closet of Pellington Manor. That safe was a fortress. It was a TL-30 rated commercial-grade vault, bolted into the foundation of the house. It required a digital code, a biometric fingerprint scan, and a physical key. I had the key on my keyring in my pocket. I had the only fingerprint that could open it. The realization hit me with the force of a freight train. They had broken in. They had not just filed paperwork with the court. They had not just spent money on credit cards. While I was driving here, while I was worrying about being excluded from a party, Vanessa must have hired a locksmith, a safecracker. They had drilled my safe. I looked at the timestamp on the photo again. 4 minutes ago. That meant the necklace was in the room. It was 50 feet away from me. I closed my eyes and I could see the scene in my mind. I could see Vanessa walking into my bedroom, my sanctuary, the room where Sarah and I had slept for 30 years, the room I kept exactly as it was the day she died. I could see Vanessa stepping over my shoes, pushing aside my suits in the closet. I could hear the whine of a drill biting into the steel of the safe. This was not theft. This was desecration. They had violated the sanctity of my home before the judge even signed the order. They were so confident, so arrogant in their victory, that they had started looting the estate before the body was even cold. And then they put it on Lily. That was the twist of the knife. They took the most precious thing I owned, the symbol of 40 years of marriage, and they draped it around the neck of an innocent girl to show off their wealth to a room full of strangers. They made Lily an accomplice to a burglary she didn't even know was happening. I looked at the caption again. So proud to give her the world. They were gifting her stolen property. They were playing the role of benevolent monarchs, handing out crown jewels that they had ripped from the vault of a man they were trying to institutionalize. I felt a tear run down my face. It was hot and angry. I wiped it away with the back of my hand. I had thought this was about money. I had thought it was about control. But it was darker than that. This was about erasure. They wanted to erase me. They wanted to erase Sarah. They wanted to take the history of the Pellington family and rewrite it so that they were the heroes and we were just the bankroll. They thought I was senile. They thought I was weak. They thought that because I was old, I would not notice. But I noticed everything. I looked at the necklace in the photo one last time. It sparkled under the ballroom lights. It looked heavy on Lily's neck. It looked like a chain. If they had drilled the safe, what else had they taken? The bonds, the deeds, the letters Sarah wrote to me during the war. The safe was not just storage. It was my heart. And they had cracked it open and rummaged through it like raccoons in a trash can. I put the phone in my pocket. The cold calm I had felt earlier was gone. It had been replaced by something else. Something ancient. Something primal. They say you should never corner a wounded animal. But they had done worse. They had broken into the animal's den. They had stolen its cubs. And they were wearing its skin as a trophy. I checked my watch. The speeches were happening now. Bradley was probably wrapping up his monologue about legacy. Legacy. He did not know the meaning of the word. Legacy is not what you steal. Legacy is what you build. And tonight, I was going to show him exactly what I had built. I pushed off the wall. My knees were stiff, but my spine was steel. I adjusted my jacket. I felt the weight of the key in my pocket, the key to a safe that was no longer secure. It didn't matter now. The safe was empty, but the man who owned it was full of rage, full of clarity. I was not going to negotiate. I was not going to settle. I was going to walk into that room and I was going to strip them bare. I was going to take back my name. I was going to take back my house. And I was going to take that necklace off my granddaughter's neck and put it back in the velvet box where it belonged. I walked toward the kitchen doors. The kitchen staff moved out of my way. They saw the look on my face. It was the look of a man who has nothing left to lose and everything to collect. They wanted the diamonds. They were going to get the pressure that made them. I pushed the doors open and stepped into the light. The ghost had arrived, and he was haunting the guest list. I stood in the shadows of the service alley, listening to the muffled bass of the music inside. The realization about Sarah's necklace had burned away the last remnants of my hesitation. I wasn't just a disappointed father anymore. I was a man who had discovered an intruder in his sanctuary. I took a deep breath, inhaling the scent of dumpster grease and expensive exhaust fumes. It was a smell I knew well. It was the smell of leverage. I pulled out my phone and dialed Giovanni again. I knew he would pick up. He always picked up for me. Not because I was a customer, but because I was the reason he wasn't currently working as a line cook in a diner in Jersey. 5 years ago, Giovanni sat in my study weeping into a glass of scotch. He had over-leveraged himself, expanding too fast, trying to turn the Gilded Rose into a franchise. The banks were calling the loans. The sharks were circling. He needed $2 million by Friday, or he would lose everything. His house, his reputation, his father's legacy. I didn't give him the money. I bought the debt. I bought the paper from the bank for 60 cents on the dollar. I restructured the loans. I kept his name on the door and his face on the menu, but the equity shifted. I owned the building. I owned the brand. I owned the liquor license. But I never told anyone. I let him keep his pride. I let him play the big-shot restaurateur while I sat in the background quietly approving the quarterly budgets. That was the deal. Silence for solvency. But tonight, I was calling in the marker. "Lawrence!" Giovanni's voice was breathless. He sounded like a man running uphill. "I am at the register. The card declined just like you said. Mrs. Vanessa is screaming at the waiter." "Let her scream," I said calmly. "I need you to do something else for me, Giovanni. And I need you to do it quietly." "Anything, Lawrence. Anything." "I need the guest list," I said. "Not the one the hostess has. I need the real one. The one with the seating chart and the VIP notes. And I need the run of show. The script for the MC." "The script?" Giovanni asked, confused. "Lawrence, why do you want the script?" "Because my son is running a production in there, Giovanni. And I want to know my lines before I walk on stage." "I will get them," Giovanni whispered. "But Lawrence, if you go in there, it will be a massacre." "It's already a massacre, Giovanni," I said, looking at the service door. "They just don't know they are the ones bleeding yet. Bring the papers to the back door. 5 minutes." I hung up. I waited in the dark. A busboy came out to smoke a cigarette, saw me standing there like a statue in a graveyard suit, and quickly went back inside. He probably thought I was a ghost. In a way, he was right. I was the ghost of consequences past. I leaned against the brick wall and closed my eyes. I thought about the man I used to be. The man who built Pellington Logistics from a single rusted truck into a fleet of 3,000. I was ruthless then. I had to be. In the shipping business, weakness is blood in the water. If you are late, you are dead. If you are soft, you are eaten. I had softened for Bradley. I had let him believe that money was a renewable resource that grew on trees in my backyard. I had protected him from the harsh physics of the real world. That ends tonight. The heavy metal door creaked open. A slice of yellow light cut across the alley pavement. Giovanni stepped out. He looked terrified. He was holding a leather-bound folder and a stack of stapled papers. He walked over to me, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the gravel. He looked at my suit, then at my face. He didn't see the friend who had saved him. He saw the titan who had negotiated the purchase of his life's work over a handshake. "Here," Giovanni said, handing me the papers. His hands were shaking. "This is everything, the full manifest." I took them. I didn't say thank you. I was working. I flipped open the guest list first. It was organized by table number. Table 1, the head table, Bradley Pellington, Vanessa Pellington, Lily Pellington. And then a name that made my jaw tighten. Dr. Eris Thorne. He was here. The doctor. The man who had sold his medical ethics for $10,000 was sitting at the head table eating the filet mignon I paid for. He wasn't just a hired gun. He was a guest of honor. I scanned the rest of the list. It read like a who's who of people I had avoided for 40 years. Local politicians with sticky fingers, real estate developers known for cutting corners, high-risk lenders. This wasn't a birthday party. It was a networking event. It was a fundraiser. Bradley and Vanessa had curated a room full of sharks, and they were using my granddaughter as the bait. They were showing off their wealth, trying to secure new loans, new investments, new suckers to fund their lifestyle. "Look at the notes," Giovanni whispered, pointing to the margin. I looked. Next to each name, Vanessa had written notes in red ink. "Mr. Henderson, liquidity issue. Needs assurance of trust assets. Mrs. Gable, real estate investor. Pitch the manor renovation. Mr. Sterling, hard money lender. Show him the jewelry. Show him the jewelry." My stomach turned. They weren't just showing off the necklace. They were using it as collateral. They were proving they had tangible assets to borrow against. They were parading Lily around like a prize horse showing her teeth to the highest bidder. I closed the guest list. I felt sick, but the sickness was quickly replaced by a cold, hard resolve. "Now the script," I said. I opened the stapled packet. It was the timeline for the evening. 8:00 p.m. Cocktails. 8:45 p.m. Dinner. 9:30 p.m. The speech. I skipped to the speech. It was typed out in large font, double-spaced. It was titled, "The Transition." I read the first paragraph. "Friends, family, distinguished guests. Tonight, we celebrate not just the coming of age of our beautiful daughter, but the passing of the torch. As many of you know, my father Lawrence has been battling a severe cognitive decline. It breaks my heart to say that he can no longer carry the burden of the Pellington legacy." I read on. It got worse. "In accordance with his wishes and for his own safety, we have made the difficult decision to move him into full-time care. But before his mind left us, he expressed one final lucid wish. He wanted to ensure that the empire he built would continue to thrive. Tonight, I am proud to announce that full control of Pellington Logistics and the family estate is transitioning to Vanessa and myself, effective immediately." I stared at the words. Effective immediately. They weren't waiting for the judge. They weren't waiting for Monday. They were announcing the takeover tonight. They were going to stand on that stage, look 300 people in the eye, and lie about my sanity to seal their business deals. They were using my incapacity as a closing technique. "They are going to announce it in 10 minutes, Giovanni said, checking his watch. "Bradley is already getting the microphone ready." I looked at the script again. There was a note at the bottom handwritten by Vanessa. "Make sure to mention the trust. Investors need to know the capital is unlocked." Unlocked. They thought the trust was a piggy bank. They didn't know it was a fortress. They didn't know about the morality clauses, the fiduciary triggers, the ironclad stipulations I had written into the bylaws 30 years ago to prevent exactly this kind of looting. But they were about to find out. Giovanni, I said, closing the script. You have a projector in there, a big screen for the slideshow. Yes, it is connected to the main system. Can you access it remotely? Yes, from the iPad. Good. I handed him the folder back, but I kept the script. I rolled it up and put it in my inside pocket right next to my heart. Go back inside, I said. Do not say a word to Bradley. Let him start the speech. Let him get to the part about my decline. Let him get to the part about the nursing home. And then, Giovanni asked. And then, I said, I want you to kill the lights. Kill the lights. Pitch black, Giovanni, total darkness. Cut the music, cut the microphone. Give me 10 seconds of silence. And then what? Then turn the spotlight on the stage. Just one light. Center stage. Lawrence, you are going to give him a heart attack. No, I said. I am going to give him a reality check. Go. Giovanni hesitated for a second, then nodded. He turned and ran back inside the kitchen. I stood alone in the alley. I adjusted my cuffs. I straightened my tie. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I was in the zone. This was the feeling I used to get before a merger meeting. The feeling of knowing you have the better hand, the deeper pockets, and the stronger will. They wanted to tell a story about a senile old man, fine. I would let them tell it. I would let them build their castle of lies brick by brick. I would let them climb to the very top of the tower and wave their flags. And then I would pull the foundation out from under them. I walked to the door. I didn't open it yet. I listened. I could hear the murmur of the crowd inside, the clink of silverware, the low hum of anticipation. They were eating my food. They were drinking my wine. They were judging my worth based on a lie my son was feeding them. I checked my phone. It was 9:28. 2 minutes to showtime. I thought about Lily wearing Sarah's necklace. I thought about the safe drilled open in my bedroom. I thought about the $10,000 wired to a doctor I had never met. I wasn't doing this for revenge. Revenge is petty. Revenge is emotional. I was doing this for corrections. I was correcting the record. I was correcting the balance sheet. I was correcting the mistake I made when I raised a son to believe he was entitled to things he hadn't earned. The music inside stopped. The room went quiet. I heard Bradley's voice boom over the speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, if I could have your attention, please. It was time. I pushed the heavy steel door open. The heat of the kitchen washed over me again. The staff looked up, but they didn't stop me. They saw Giovanni's face earlier. They knew I was the boss. I walked through the kitchen, past the stoves, past the prep stations. I walked with the rhythm of a ticking clock. I reached the double doors to the ballroom. I stood there listening. My father, Bradley was saying, his voice thick with fake emotion. My father was a giant of industry. But time is a thief that robs even the strongest among us. I put my hand on the door handle. Time is a thief, Bradley, but so are you. It has been a painful journey watching him fade, Bradley continued. Watching the brilliance dim. That is why tonight, the lights went out. Total darkness. The crowd gasped. A few nervous laughs. Someone dropped a glass. What is going on? Bradley's voice cracked in the dark. Giovanni. Silence. 1 second. 2 seconds. 3. I opened the doors. I stepped into the room. The darkness was absolute, but I knew exactly where the stage was. I had paid for the floor plan. 4 seconds. 5. I walked down the center aisle. My footsteps were silent on the carpet. 6 seconds. 7. Is this part of the show? Someone whispered. 8 seconds. 9. I reached the stairs to the stage. I climbed them. 1, 2, 3, 10. The spotlight slammed on. It blinded me for a second, a beam of pure white light cutting through the blackness. But I didn't blink. I stood there, center stage, right next to my son. The crowd screamed. Bradley jumped back as if he had seen a ghost. He dropped the microphone. It hit the floor with a deafening thud. He stared at me. His eyes were wide, terrified, uncomprehending. He looked at my old suit. He looked at my face. "Dad," he whispered. I didn't look at him. I bent down and picked up the microphone. I looked out at the 300 faces staring back at me from the dark. The investors, the sharks, the parasites. I smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. "Good evening," I said. "My name is Lawrence Pellington, and I have a few corrections to make to that speech." The heavy steel door clicked shut behind Giovanni, leaving me alone in the service corridor with the smell of grease and the humming of the industrial air conditioning units. In my hands, I held the blueprint of my own demise. It was a thick packet bound with a gold spiral coil, the cover embossed with the logo of the event planning company Vanessa had hired. VP Image Consulting. She had branded her own coup. I moved toward the single flickering security light mounted on the brick wall and opened the document. I had spent 40 years reading contracts. I knew how to spot the fine print that could bankrupt a company. I knew how to find the loophole that allowed a supplier to ship substandard steel. But nothing I had ever read in a boardroom prepared me for the cold, calculated malice of a run-of-show script designed to erase a father from his own legacy. I skipped past the lighting cues and the floral arrangement diagrams. I went straight to the timeline. It was broken down by the minute. It was not a party. It was a military operation. 8:30 p.m. MC. Introduction. Note to MC: warm up the crowd. Keep it light. Mention the illustrious history of the Pellington family, but pivot quickly to the future. Do not dwell on the past. I flipped the page. There were notes in the margins written in Vanessa's distinctive looping handwriting. Make sure the spotlight stays on Bradley. If anyone asks about Lawrence, say he is resting comfortably at the facility. The facility. They were already using the past tense of my freedom. They had not even gotten the court order signed yet, and they were already putting me in a home in the minds of our social circle. I turned to page 12. The header read, "The Cake Cutting Ceremony." This was usually the highlight of a 16th birthday, the moment where the father dances with the daughter, where the candles are blown out. But here it was scripted as something else entirely. I read the dialogue written for Bradley. It was typed out in bold courier font. Bradley. Wait for applause to die down. Look emotional. Take Vanessa's hand. Friends, before we cut this cake, which symbolizes the sweetness of the future, I have to share a bittersweet moment with you all. As many of you know, my father Lawrence has been the rock of this family for decades. But even rocks erode with time. I felt a muscle in my jaw jump. Erode. He was talking about me like I was a crumbling coastline, not the man who had just audited his bank accounts from a parking lot. The script continued. Bradley signal for a V team to dim lights. Cue soft piano music. His health has been declining rapidly over the last few months. It has been hard to watch. The man who built this empire is tired. He is confused. And in his moments of clarity, he has asked for one thing. He has asked to rest. I stared at the page. Moments of clarity. He was painting a picture of a drooling invalid. He was stealing my dignity to garner sympathy. Bradley, look at the investors at Table 1 and Table 2. Therefore, effective tonight in accordance with his wishes, and to ensure the stability of the Pellington Trust, my father has decided to formally step down. He has signed over full managing control of the estate and the logistics firm to Vanessa and myself. He wanted you all to know that the legacy is in safe hands. I almost laughed. Signed over. I hadn't signed anything but a check for this party. They were lying to 300 people. They were lying to the banks represented in that room. They were committing fraud on a stage with a microphone. But it was the next section that made my blood run cold. Action MC brings out the grandfather's chair. Note: place a single empty antique armchair on the stage next to the cake. Place a blanket on it. Vanessa. Place a hand on the empty chair. We saved this seat for him. Even though he couldn't be here mentally or physically, his spirit is with us. We are doing this for you, Lawrence. Go with God. They were staging a wake. They were literally burying me alive. The empty chair with the blanket was a prop designed to evoke the image of a feeble old man who had passed the torch before passing away. It was theater. Cruel, manipulative theater designed to make the hostile takeover look like a benevolent succession. I looked at the margin notes again. Vanessa had written, "Make sure the investors see us crying. It makes the transition look like a burden we are accepting, not a prize we are taking." They knew exactly what they were doing. They knew that if they simply announced a takeover, people would ask questions. Investors would get nervous. But if they framed it as a tragedy, as a dutiful son taking on the heavy load of a sick father's empire, then they were heroes. They were martyrs. I flipped to the Q&A section. Yes, they had even scripted the casual conversations. If asked about the trust response, the assets are being restructured to allow for more aggressive growth now that the conservative management style of the past is behind us. Aggressive growth. That was code for liquidation. They were going to sell the warehouses. They were going to leverage the real estate. They were going to turn my hard assets into cash and blow it on lifestyle brands and luxury vacations. If asked about visitation response, "We are limiting visitors for now. The doctors say he needs absolute quiet. It is best to remember him as he was." Isolation. That was the final nail. They intended to cut me off completely. No friends, no old business partners, just silence. They would stick me in Sunrise Hills, tell the staff I was violent and paranoid, and keep everyone away until I died. I closed the script. My hands were shaking, not from age, but from the sheer adrenaline of the revelation. This wasn't just greed. This was hatred. You don't do this to someone you love, even if you want their money. You do this to someone you despise. You do this to an enemy you want to humiliate. I thought about the times I had held Bradley when he cried over a broken toy. I thought about the tuition checks, the down payments, the times I had kept quiet when Vanessa insulted my taste just to keep the peace. I had nurtured this hatred. I had watered it with my generosity. I had shielded them from the consequences of their own mediocrity so often that they began to resent the shield itself. They hated me because they needed me, and the only way to stop needing me was to destroy me. I looked at the back page of the packet. It was a contact list for the event staff. At the bottom, highlighted in yellow, was a name I recognized from my earlier investigation. On-site medical support, Dr. Aris Thorne. He was there. The script confirmed it. He wasn't just a guest. He was medical support. Why would a birthday party need a geriatric psychiatrist on site? Then it hit me. They expected me to show up. Or rather, they feared I might show up before they could lock me away. If I arrived and made a scene, they needed a doctor there to sedate me, to confirm to the crowd that my anger was a symptom of my condition. Dr. Thorne was the safety net. If Lawrence Pellington walks in shouting, "Doctor," Thorne steps up, waves a badge, and says, "I am his doctor. He is having an episode." The police arrive. I get taken away in an ambulance instead of a squad car. The narrative holds. It was perfect. It was diabolical. They had weaponized the party. The guests were the jury, the stage was the court, and the script was the verdict. And I had just paid $50,000 for the executioner's fee. I rolled the script up tight. It felt like a baton, a solid, heavy rod of truth. I wasn't going to tear it up. I wasn't going to burn it. I was going to use it. I looked at the service door. Inside that ballroom, my son was preparing to perform the monologue of his life. He was preparing to stand next to an empty chair and weep for a father who was standing 20 feet away holding the receipt for his treachery. I checked my watch. 9:25. The cake cutting was scheduled for 9:45. I had 20 minutes. I didn't need 20 minutes. I needed 5. I took out my phone and snapped photos of the key pages of the script, the dialogue about my decline, the notes about the investors, the cues for the fake tears. I sent them to Rick Belmont. Add this to the file, I typed. Exhibit B, premeditated fraud. Then I sent a text to Giovanni. I need you to access the projector. I have a new slideshow for the cake cutting. I wasn't just going to interrupt the speech. I was going to rewrite the ending. They wanted a transition of power. They were going to get one, but it wasn't going to be the one they wrote. I straightened my tie. I brushed a speck of dust off the shoulder of my old suit. I didn't look like a tycoon. I looked like a grandfather. And that was my camouflage. They expected the monster they had invented in their lies. The confused, angry old man. They weren't expecting the CEO. I walked toward the kitchen. The script was in my pocket right next to my heart. It burned there like a coal. Bradley wanted to talk about erosion fine. I was about to show him what a landslide looks like. My phone vibrated against my ribs, a sharp, persistent buzz that signaled the arrival of the final piece of the puzzle. It was Rick Belmont. The subject line of the secure email simply read, Morality Clause Violation. Attached was a zipped folder titled Surveillance Package B. I stood under the flickering yellow light of the service entrance and tapped the screen. I thought I had seen the bottom of the well. I thought the theft, the forgery, and the betrayal were the extent of it. But as the files downloaded, I realized the well was bottomless. The first image was grainy, taken with a long-range lens. It showed the entrance of a boutique hotel in the city. The timestamp was 3 weeks ago. Vanessa was stepping out of a black sedan. She wasn't alone. A man was holding her elbow, guiding her toward the revolving doors, with a familiarity that was professional. It was Dr. Eris Thorne. I swiped to the next photo. They were in the hotel bar. Vanessa was laughing, her hand resting on his knee. Thorne was leaning in close, whispering something that made her throw her head back. It looked like a date. It looked intimate. But it was the third file that made my stomach turn over. It wasn't a photo. It was a screenshot of a text message thread recovered from the cloud backup of the family data plan I paid for. I had access to everything. They always forgot that. The conversation was between Vanessa and Bradley. Dated 2 days ago. Vanessa Eris says the affidavit is ready. He wants another $5,000 for the rush fee. Bradley. We do not have $5,000 V. The cards are maxed. Vanessa, he says we can work something out. He wants to meet for dinner tonight. Alone. Bradley. Just get the signature. I do not care what you have to do. Just make sure he signs the paper that says the old man is crazy. We are so close to the finish line. Do not blow it now. I lowered the phone. The cool night air suddenly felt stifling. My son knew. Bradley knew his wife was sleeping with the doctor. He knew she was trading her body and her dignity to secure a fraudulent diagnosis of dementia for his father. He wasn't just a thief. He was a pimp. He had prostituted his marriage to secure an inheritance. I looked at the photo of Dr. Thorne again. The man sitting inside at the head table. The man eating my food. He wasn't just a corrupt doctor. He was part of the family in the sickest way possible. I felt a wave of revulsion so strong I almost threw the phone across the alley. This was the man Bradley was raising a glass to. This was the partner in their grand scheme. It made sense now. The $10,000 transfer I saw earlier wasn't just a fee. It was likely a down payment. The rest of the payment was being extracted from Vanessa in hotel rooms, while Bradley waited at home calculating the net worth of Pellington Manor. They were rot. Pure rot. I had thought I could teach them a lesson about money, but you cannot teach economics to people who have no currency of character. You cannot teach value to people who have already sold their souls for pennies on the dollar. I closed the email. I forwarded it to the printer in my car. I wanted physical copies. I wanted to hold the proof in my hand when I looked them in the eye. But first, I had to set the trap. The stage was set inside. The lights were ready to be cut. The script was in my pocket. But I needed a trigger. I needed a reason for Lawrence Pellington to be summoned to the stage that was bureaucratic, undeniable, and humiliating. I opened my messaging app and found Giovanni's contact. I knew how the point-of-sale systems worked in the Gilded Rose because I had bought them. They were high-security terminals designed to prevent chargebacks on 5-figure bills. They had a specific protocol for flagged accounts. I typed the message slowly, my fingers steady. Giovanni, listen carefully. When the final bill is tallied, it will be roughly $45,000, including the unpaid balance and the bar tab. Bradley will try to pay with the Amex Platinum ending in 4099. That card is supplementary to my primary account. I paused, watching the 3 dots dance as Giovanni read the message. I continued typing. I have flagged that card as stolen in the banking mainframe. When he swipes it, the terminal will trigger a code 10 authorization. It will decline. But do not just tell him it declined. Tell him the system has locked the transaction due to suspected fraud. Tell him that because the amount is over the merchant limit, the banking protocol requires the primary cardholder to physically insert the MasterCard and sign a biometric release. Giovanni replied, Lawrence, he will panic. He does not have $45,000. I typed back, that is the point. He will argue. He will scream. He will try to use another card, and that one will decline too because I froze them all. When he is at his breaking point, when the guests are watching, when he is sweating through that tuxedo, tell him there is only one way to clear the debt and avoid the police. Tell him the primary cardholder has to authorize it. Giovanni, and then I cut the lights, me know. When he asks where the primary cardholder is, you tell him that the system shows the primary cardholder is on the premises. That was the key. I wanted Bradley to know I was there before he saw me. I wanted him to feel the dread. I wanted him to realize that the ghost he was trying to exorcise was actually the landlord. I imagined the scene. The waiter approaching the table. The card being declined. The hushed whispers. Vanessa trying to intervene, probably flashing a smile at Dr. Thorne, hoping he could bail them out. But Thorne wouldn't pay. Mercenaries don't pay the client's bills. Bradley would be trapped. He couldn't leave. He couldn't pay. And the system itself, the cold, unfeeling logic of banking software, would be demanding his father's presence. It was poetic. He had tried to use the legal system to declare me incompetent. Now I was using the financial system to declare him insolvent. I sent the final text. Do it, Giovanni. Initiate the transaction in 5 minutes. I put the phone away. I reached into my pocket and touched the hard plastic of my own black card. The master key. The card that could buy the restaurant the block and the silence of everyone inside. I wasn't just going to pay the bill. I was going to buy my freedom. I looked down at my old shoes. They were scuffed. They were comfortable. They had walked through construction sites and shipyards. They had walked behind my wife's casket. Tonight they were going to walk over the wreckage of my son's ego. I checked the time. 9:35. Inside, the speeches were ending. The applause was dying down. The waiters were moving in with the checks. The trap was sprung. The weapon was loaded. I took a deep breath of the cool night air. It tasted clean. It tasted like truth. I wasn't Lawrence the victim anymore. I wasn't Lawrence the confused old man. I was the primary card holder, and I was coming to collect. I stood outside the double mahogany doors of the ballroom listening to the silence of the grave my son was digging for me. The air conditioning in the hallway was cold, but the heat radiating from my chest could have melted steel. Through the wood, I could hear Bradley's voice amplified by the expensive sound system I had paid for. He was good. I had to give him that. He had the cadence of a televangelist selling salvation for a monthly fee. He was painting a masterpiece of grief using brushes dipped in pure fabrication. My father was a titan, he was saying, and his voice actually cracked with emotion. A man who built cities from the ground up, but the tragedy of the mind is that it does not respect the strength of the will. To see him now confused and frail, it is the hardest thing I have ever had to endure. I looked at Giovanni. He was standing by the light panel, his hand hovering over the master switch. He looked pale. He looked like a man who knew he was about to witness a murder, but he wasn't sure who was going to die. I nodded once. A sharp downward jerk of my chin. Giovanni pulled the lever. Inside the ballroom, the chandeliers died. The golden glow that had bathed the 300 guests in flattering light vanished instantly, plunging the room into a heavy, suffocating darkness. The music cut out. The hum of conversation stopped as if someone had sucked the air out of the room. For a heartbeat, there was total silence. Then the murmurs started low and nervous. The sound of expensive glassware clinking against tables as people shifted in their seats. Bradley's voice came through the dark, shrill, and panicked. "Is this part of the tribute?" "Giovanni, we seem to have lost power." I put my hand on the brass handle of the door. The metal was cool. I pushed. The doors swung open with a heavy hydraulic hiss. The light from the hallway spilled into the ballroom, cutting a sharp white wedge through the darkness. It was a spotlight, but not the one they had planned. It was a path. I stepped into the doorway. I was silhouetted against the bright hallway lights, a shadow in a gray suit. I knew what they saw. They saw the outline of the man they had just spent 30 minutes mourning. They saw the posture of the man Bradley had claimed was curled up in a facility somewhere staring at a wall. But I was not curled up. I was standing straight, my shoulders squared, my head high. Giovanni stepped out from behind the door. He did not call for security. He did not apologize to the guests. He walked in front of me, turned and bowed his head low, holding the door open with the reverence of a butler, welcoming the master of the house back from a long war. I walked in. My shoes made a rhythmic, deliberate sound on the parquet floor. Click, click, click. It was the only sound in the room. I walked down the center aisle. The darkness of the room made the hallway light behind me feel like a portal to another world. I could feel the eyes of the guests adjusting to the gloom fixing on me. I saw faces I recognized in the shadows. Bankers who had denied me loans 40 years ago. Competitors I had crushed in the 90s. Socialites who had never invited me to their galas, but were happy to drink my champagne. They were frozen. They were witnessing the impossible. The narrative Bradley had spun, the story of the senile, helpless invalid, was disintegrating with every step I took. An invalid does not walk with the energy of a predator. A man with dementia does not scan a room with eyes that miss nothing. I saw the stage ahead. It was illuminated by the emergency exit lights casting everything in a ghostly red and green glow. There was the empty armchair, the prop they had set up to represent my absence. There was the blanket draped over it, a symbol of my frailty. And there was Bradley. My son stood at the podium gripping the edges as if the wood were the only thing keeping him upright. He was staring at me, his mouth slightly open, his eyes wide and glassy. He looked like a child who had been caught playing with matches while the house burned down around him. Vanessa stood next to him. In the dim light, I saw her hand fly to her throat, clutching the pearls I had bought her for Christmas 5 years ago. She took a step back, her heel catching on the hem of her gown. She looked toward the side of the stage, looking for Dr. Thorne, looking for her safety net. But Dr. Thorne was not moving. I saw him at the head table, the hole. He was frozen, a forkful of salmon halfway to his mouth. He was a man of science, and he knew exactly what he was looking at. He was looking at a malpractice lawsuit walking toward him in a 10-year-old suit. I kept walking. I did not hurry. I did not run. I let the tension build until the air in the room felt solid. When I reached the base of the stairs leading to the stage, I stopped. I stood in the pool of light from the hallway, a ghost made flesh. I looked up at Bradley. He looked down at me. The color had drained from his face, leaving him the color of old ash. He tried to speak. He tried to say something, to save the moment, to spin the story, to tell the crowd that this was just a confused old man wandering in from the cold. But his throat closed up. The lie died in his mouth. His hand spasmed. The wireless microphone, which he had been using to bury my reputation, slipped from his sweaty fingers. It hit the stage floor with a deafening electronic thud, followed by a high-pitched squeal of feedback that tore through the room like a scream. The guests flinched, covering their ears. But Bradley didn't move. He didn't pick it up. He just stared at me, terrified, paralyzed, stripped of his script and his lights and his confidence. The silence that followed the feedback was absolute. It was the silence of a held breath. It was the silence of judgment. I slowly climbed the stairs. 1, 2, 3. I walked past the empty armchair. I grabbed the blanket they had placed there, the prop meant to symbolize my weakness, and I threw it on the floor. I stepped up to the podium. I bent down and picked up the microphone. It was heavy. It felt good. I looked out at the sea of faces in the dark. I couldn't see them clearly, but I knew they were there. I could smell their expensive perfume and their fear. I turned to Bradley. He was shaking now, visibly trembling under the gaze of the room. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I spoke with the quiet, terrifying authority of a man who owns the building, the microphone, and the debt of everyone standing on the stage. "You forgot to check the guest list, son," I said. My voice boomed through the speakers, clear and sharp, cutting through the darkness. "Because if you had checked, you would have seen that the owner is always invited." Vanessa moved faster than I expected for a woman wearing 5-inch heels and a dress structured like a suspension bridge. She lunged across the stage, her face contorted into a mask of panic that cracked the heavy makeup she had applied for the cameras. She reached for me, her hands hooked into claws, grabbing at the lapels of my old suit, trying to physically shove me away from the podium. "Dad." "You are confused," she hissed, her voice a serrated whisper, meant only for me, but picked up by the sensitive diaphragm of the microphone I held firmly in my hand. "You are having an episode. You need to sit down. Security is coming." I did not move. I did not step back. I looked at her hands on my chest, then up at her eyes. They were wide, frantic, darting around the room like a trapped animal looking for a hole in the fence. She was terrified. Not for my health, but for her narrative. She was watching her social standing disintegrate in real time. "I do not think security is coming." "Vanessa," I said. My voice amplified, filling every corner of the silent ballroom. "Because I pay the security company, and they know better than to touch the man who signs the checks." She froze. The crowd murmured a low, rolling sound, like the tide coming in. They were leaning forward. The sharks in the room smelled blood, and for the first time all night, they weren't looking at my granddaughter. They were looking at the spectacle of a dynasty collapsing. Vanessa tried to grab the microphone. I simply moved it out of her reach. She stumbled, her heel catching on the stage floor, and she had to grab Bradley's arm to stay upright. Bradley was useless. He stood there like a statue made of ash, staring at me with a mixture of horror and awe. He had spent his whole life waiting for me to die so he could become the man of the house. He was just realizing that the house was never his. I turned to the audience. I saw the faces of bankers I had known for 30 years. I saw the politicians. I saw the social climbers. My daughter-in-law tells you I am unwell, I said, my voice calm, conversational, almost bored. She tells you I am losing my grip on reality. She says I am unfit to manage the Pellington estate. It is a compelling story, a tragedy. But in my business, we do not rely on stories. We rely on documentation. I raised my hand and snapped my fingers. A sharp, crisp sound. Giovanni, turn it on. Behind me, the massive projection screen that had been displaying a loop of Lily's childhood photos flickered. The sentimental piano music cut out abruptly, replaced by the hum of the projector fan. The image changed. It was not a photo of a smiling baby. It was a PDF, a bank statement. Blow up to 10 feet tall. The numbers were black and stark against the white background. Exhibit A, I said, pointing to the screen without looking back. This is the operating account for the Pellington Family Trust. 2 weeks ago, I deposited $50,000. It was earmarked for this party, for my granddaughter. I paused, letting the room read the lines. Now look at the withdrawals. $15,000 to Sovereign Credit Services, $12,000 to VP Image Consulting, $4,000 to Luxury Escapes Cabo. Vanessa let out a strangled sound. No, she gasped. Turn it off. Bradley, do something. Bradley did nothing. He was staring at the screen, reading the autopsy of his own integrity. I did not know dementia came with a line-item budget for debt consolidation, I said dryly. I did not know that my cognitive decline required my daughter-in-law to pay herself a $12,000 consulting fee out of her own daughter's birthday money. The room was deadly silent. I could hear the ice melting in the untouched drinks. But money is just money, I continued. You can print more of it. What you cannot print is a medical diagnosis. I signaled Giovanni again. The screen changed. This time it was a medical affidavit. The letterhead was impressive. Mindset Horizons LLC. The signature at the bottom was bold and artistic. Dr. Eris Thorne. This document states that I, Lawrence Pellington, was evaluated on the 12th of this month via telemedicine, I said. It states that I was unable to recall the names of my children, that I was aggressive, that I scored a 10 on the cognitive impairment scale. I looked down at the head table. I found him. Dr. Thorne was trying to stand up. He was dabbing his mouth with a napkin, his face a mask of professional neutrality that was slipping fast. Dr. Thorne, I said. The spotlight swung to him. He froze. I have never met you. We have never spoken. My computer logs show no video calls on the 12th. In fact, on the 12th, I was inspecting a shipyard in Baltimore. I have the flight logs and the security tapes to prove it. Thorne sat back down. He looked sick. So I asked myself, why would a respected doctor sign a perjury affidavit? Why would he risk his medical license to lock away a man he has never seen? The screen changed again. This time it was a wire transfer receipt. $10,000. From Bradley Pellington to Dr. Eris Thorne. Dated 5 days before the affidavit was signed. The crowd gasped. It was audible. A collective intake of shock. This was not just family drama anymore. This was a crime. This was bribery. This was fraud. It appears my dementia was purchased, I said. And it was quite a bargain. $10,000 to erase a man's life. Vanessa was shaking her head violently, tears streaming down her face, ruining the foundation she had spent an hour applying. You are lying, she screamed. You are twisting everything. We did it for you. We did it because we love you. Love, I repeated, testing the word like a coin I suspected was counterfeit. Let us talk about love, Vanessa. I signaled Giovanni for the final time. The screen flickered. The wire transfer disappeared. In its place appeared a photograph. It was grainy, taken with a long lens, but the subjects were unmistakable. It was the entrance to the boutique hotel. Vanessa stepping out of the black sedan. Dr. Thorne holding her elbow. The next photo. The bar. The hand on the knee. The whisper. And then the text messages. Blow up large enough for the people in the back row to read. Just get the signature. I do not care what you have to do. He wants another $5,000. Or dinner. Alone. The sound in the room was not a gasp this time. It was a roar. A shockwave of scandal that hit the walls and bounced back. Bradley turned to look at the screen. He looked at the photo of his wife with the doctor. He looked at the text messages he had sent. He looked at the text messages she had sent. He knew. I knew he knew. But seeing it on a 10-foot screen in front of his investors, his friends, his daughter, that was different. That was reality. Vanessa collapsed. She didn't faint, she just gave up. She sank to the floor of the stage, her dress billowing around her like a deflated parachute. She covered her face with her hands. I walked to the edge of the stage. I looked down at Dr. Thorne. You took the money, doctor, I said. And you took the wife. But you forgot to take the precaution of checking who owned the surveillance system in this family. I turned back to Bradley. He was looking at me with eyes that were dead. You say I am crazy, son, I said, my voice dropping to a register that was intimate and terrifying. You told this room I am losing my mind. I gestured to the screen where the evidence of their betrayal was glowing in high definition. I looked him dead in the eye. What kind of crazy person knows you used your daughter's tuition money to support a lover? Bradley flinched as if I had hit him. What kind of senile old man tracks every penny of a $50,000 theft while you are sleeping? I stepped closer to him, invading his personal space, forcing him to look at the father he tried to bury. I am not crazy, Bradley. I am awake. And for the first time in 40 years, so are you. The silence that followed my declaration was heavy enough to crush a man. Bradley stared at me, his mouth opening and closing like a fish on a dock, his eyes darting from my face to the screen, where his betrayal was still glowing in high definition. He looked small. For the first time in his life, he didn't look like the heir to an empire. He looked like exactly what he was, a 40-year-old man who had never paid a bill he couldn't forward to his father. Giovanni stepped out from the shadows of the wings. He held a small black leather folio in one hand and a wireless credit card terminal in the other. The little machine was beeping a sharp, rhythmic electronic pulse that cut through the tension like a metronome counting down to an explosion. He walked to the center of the stage. He didn't look at me. He looked at Bradley. Mr. Bradley, Giovanni said, his voice amplified by the microphone I still held. I am afraid we have a problem with the final settlement. Bradley wiped sweat from his forehead. Not now, Giovanni. Can't you see we are in the middle of something? I am afraid it cannot wait, Sir Giovanni replied, his tone polite, but possessing the immovable weight of a glacier. The system has flagged the transaction. The American Express Platinum card you provided earlier, the one ending in 4099, has been declined. Bradley let out a nervous laugh. That is impossible. Run it again. It has no limit. I have run it 3 times, Sir Giovanni said. The response code is specific. Pickup card. Do not honor. Suspected fraud. The crowd murmured. The word fraud rippled through the room faster than the champagne had. Bradley patted his pockets frantically. He pulled out a sleek metal wallet. He fumbled with it, dropping a gold Visa card onto the stage floor. He scrambled to pick it up, his dignity evaporating with every second he spent on his knees. Try this one, he said, thrusting the card at Giovanni. It is the corporate reserve card. Giovanni took it. He inserted it into the machine. We all watched the little screen. Processing. Processing. A harsh buzz sounded. Declined. Try the MasterCard. Bradley shouted, his voice rising to a shriek. Declined. Try the Discover. Declined. I stood there watching the audit play out in real time. I had frozen them all. Every supplementary card, every joint account, every line of credit attached to my name. I had turned off the tap, and now they were discovering just how thirsty they really were. Giovanni looked at the receipt printing out of the machine. It was long. Mr. Bradley, the total outstanding balance for the evening, including the venue fee, the catering, the open bar, and the service charge, is $45,342. $45,000, Bradley whispered. We require immediate payment, Giovanni said. Or per company policy regarding theft of services, I will be forced to contact the authorities. The police station is only 2 blocks away. They can be here in 3 minutes. Police. The word hung in the air. The investors at the front tables began to stand up. They were buttoning their jackets, checking their phones, distancing themselves from the blast zone. Vanessa grabbed Bradley's arm. Her nails dug into his tuxedo jacket. Fix this, she hissed. Pay him. You said you had it covered. You said the old man's money was ours. It is gone, V. Bradley stammered. It is all gone. He cut us off. Vanessa turned to me. Her face was a ruin of mascara and desperation. Dad, please. You can't let them arrest us. Just write a check. We will pay you back. We promise. Pay me back, I asked, my voice calm and cold. With what, Vanessa? With the money you stole from my safe. With the money you made selling your dignity to Dr. Thorne. She flinched. You have nothing, I continued. You own nothing. The clothes on your back were paid for with my credit card. The car in the valet lot is leased in my name. Even the champagne in your glass belongs to me. Vanessa looked at the crowd. She saw the judgment. She saw the disgust. And then she snapped. She turned on Bradley. She shoved him hard in the chest. This is your fault, she screamed. You told me he was senile. You told me he didn't check the statements. You said he was a vegetable. I did what you told me to do, Bradley shouted back, pushing her away. You were the one who needed the parties. You were the one who needed the image consultant. You spent $15,000 on a brand strategy while I was trying to keep the lights on. I needed that strategy because you are a failure, Vanessa shrieked. Her voice cracked, breaking into a hysterical sob. I married a CEO and I ended up with an allowance boy. You are nothing without him. You are just a parasite. A parasite? Bradley laughed, a manic sound that bordered on madness. You are the one sleeping with the doctor to get a signature. You are the one who broke into the safe. You are the criminal, Vanessa. I am just the idiot who paid for your lifestyle. They were circling each other now like wolves trapped in a pit, tearing at each other's throats. The facade of the power couple, the image of the perfect successors, was gone. All that was left was 2 scared, greedy children realizing the lights had been turned on and they were holding the matches. I watched them. I felt no satisfaction, only a deep, hollow pity. They were destroying each other over money they never earned and a status they never deserved. Giovanni cleared his throat. Sir, ma'am. The bill. Bradley looked at his empty wallet. Vanessa looked at her useless husband. They had nothing. I stepped forward. I didn't look at them. I looked at Giovanni. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my own card. It was heavy black metal. The Titanium Centurion. I handed it to Giovanni. I will cover the debt, I said. Bradley slumped with relief. Thank God, Dad. Thank you. I knew you wouldn't. I held up a hand, stopping him. I am paying the bill, Bradley, because I do not stiff working people. Giovanni and his staff worked hard tonight. They deserve to be paid. I turned to face my son one last time. But this is the last check. The last bailout. The last time I cleans up your mess. I looked at the crowd. The party is over, I said. Go home. I turned and walked off the stage, leaving them there, in the spotlight, broke, exposed, and utterly alone. The room cleared out faster than a losing casino. The investors fled, first terrified of being associated with the fraud, while the socialites followed, whispering into their phones, spreading the news of the Pellington scandal, before they even reached the valet. Bradley and Vanessa stood on the stage, abandoned props in a play that had been canceled. Giovanni brought the card reader to the edge of the stage. I inserted the heavy black metal of my Centurion card. The chip reader beeped a single decisive tone. Approved. $45,000. It was the price of a mid-sized sedan gone in a second. I didn't flinch. I signed the receipt with a flourish. Thank you, Lawrence. Giovanni whispered, his eyes sad. I am sorry it had to end this way. It didn't end, Giovanni, I said, pocketing my card. It just corrected. I walked over to where Bradley and Vanessa were huddled. They looked shell-shocked. Vanessa's mascara was running in black rivers down her cheeks, ruining the face she had spent thousands to perfect. Bradley was staring at his shoes, the same shoes he had bought with the money he stole from me. Rick Belmont walked through the double doors. He looked exactly as I expected, impeccable calm, and carrying a leather briefcase that contained the legal equivalent of a nuclear warhead. He walked up to the stage, nodding at me. Mr. Pellington, Rick said. The papers are ready. Serve them, I said. Rick opened the briefcase. He handed a thick manila envelope to Bradley and another to Vanessa. What is this? Bradley croaked, his voice raw and broken. That is a notice to quit, I said. You currently reside in a penthouse apartment in the financial district. That apartment is owned by Pellington Logistics Holdings. Since you are no longer an employee, and since you have proven to be a liability to the company, your tenancy is terminated. You can't kick us out. Vanessa sobbed, clutching the envelope. We have rights. We have a lease. You have a corporate housing agreement. Rick corrected, his tone dry as dust. Clause 4, Section B states that occupancy is contingent upon good standing with the primary shareholder. As of tonight, you are in default. You have 24 hours to vacate the premises. The locks will be changed tomorrow at midnight. Bradley looked at me, his eyes pleading. Dad, where are we supposed to go? We have no money. We have no credit. I suggest you ask Dr. Thorne if he has a guest room, I said, my voice cold. Or perhaps you can sell that Porsche you leased. Oh, wait, I canceled the lease payments 10 minutes ago. They will be repossessing it in the morning. I turned to Lily. She was standing by the edge of the stage, still clutching her arms, looking small and terrified in the wreckage of her party. I walked over to her. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the velvet box I had brought from the car. Lily, I said gently, give me the necklace. She reached up, her fingers trembling, and unclasped Sarah's diamonds. She dropped them into my hand. They felt heavy, warm from her skin. I put them in the box and snapped it shut. This stays in the vault, I said, but I have something else for you. I nodded to Rick. He handed me a blue folder. This is the Pellington Generational Trust, I told her, handing her the folder. It contains the assets that were previously designated for your father. The stocks, the bonds, the liquid capital. It is all yours now. Vanessa's head snapped up. She is a minor. We are her guardians. We control her assets. Not this asset, Rick said, stepping between Vanessa and her daughter. The trust is structured as a restrictive endowment. The funds are locked until Lily turns 25. And there is a stipulation. What stipulation? Bradley asked, sensing the final trap. The beneficiary must maintain a primary residence separate from her parents, I said. If you attempt to access these funds or if you attempt to coerce her into giving you money, the trust dissolves and the capital is donated to the Merchant Marine Widows Fund. You get nothing. Ever. I looked at my son. You wanted to live off the Pellington name. Fine. But you will not live off my granddaughter's future. You are on your own, Bradley. Sink or swim. I offered my arm to Lily. Come on, kid. Let's get out of here. She took my arm. She didn't look back at her parents. She didn't say goodbye. She just walked with me past the empty tables, past the ruined cake, and out into the night. The air outside was crisp, scrubbing the scent of expensive perfume and desperation from my lungs. The valet was gone. My Ford Taurus was parked right where I left it, under the street lamp, looking like a tank that had survived a war. I opened the passenger door for Lily. She slid onto the cracked leather seat, the blue folder clutched to her chest like a shield. I got in the driver's side and turned the key. The engine rumbled to life, a steady, reliable sound in a world of noise. Where are we going? Lily asked, her voice small. To get dinner, I said. Real dinner. I drove 3 blocks to a spot I had been going to since the 80s. Sal's Custard and Fries. It was a shack on the side of the road with neon lights that buzzed, and a menu that hadn't changed in 30 years. I ordered 2 vanilla cones and a basket of fries. Total cost $12. I paid with cash. We sat on the hood of the Taurus watching the traffic go by. Lily licked her ice cream, the sugar melting the shock on her face. Grandpa, she said after a long silence, did you really buy the building? I bought the debt, I said. Same thing. Same. Why didn't you tell them before? Why did you let them humiliate you at the door? I looked at her. She had her grandmother's eyes. Smart eyes. Because sometimes, Lily, you have to let people show you who they really are, I said. If I had walked in there waving my checkbook, they would have just pretended to love me. They would have smiled and taken the money and laughed at me behind my back. I needed to know the truth, and I needed you to see it. She nodded slowly. They really spent my college money on a consultant. They spent my money, I corrected. Your college money is safe. It is in that folder. She looked down at the documents. I don't want to be like them, Grandpa. I don't want to care about things that don't matter. You won't, I said, because you are going to learn how to earn it. You are going to learn that money is just fuel. It is not the destination. It is just what gets you there. I finished my cone. I wiped my hands on a paper napkin. I felt lighter than I had in years. The weight of the secret. The weight of the pretense, it was all gone. I had lost a son tonight. I knew that. Bradley would never forgive me for exposing him. He would hate me until the day I died. But looking at Lily sitting there eating fries on the hood of a 10-year-old car, I knew I had made the right trade. I had cut off the rot to save the root. Come on, I said, hopping off the hood. I will drive you to your aunt's house. You can stay there tonight. Grandpa? Yeah. You are not senile, are you? I laughed. It was a deep belly laugh that felt good in the cold air. Not today, kid, I said. Not today. I got back in the car. As I pulled away from the curb, I looked in the rearview mirror one last time. The gilded rose was dark in the distance. The party was over. The guests were gone. The tiger had come to dinner, and he hadn't just sat under the table. He had flipped it over. And now, finally, the house was clean. Looking back, I realized that the greatest inheritance I can leave behind is not my bank account, but my backbone. For years, I thought providing for my son was an act of love, but I was only funding his moral bankruptcy. I learned the hard way that you cannot buy respect, and you certainly cannot steal dignity. Real family isn't defined by blood, it is defined by honor, and sometimes you have to be willing to burn the bridge to stop the enemy from crossing. By cutting off the dead weight, I didn't just save my fortune, I saved my granddaughter's future. If you agree that respect must be earned and never bought, hit that like button and tell me in the comments if you would have exposed them the same way I did.